So I'm going to rebuild a rear end with used gears, used bearings, and I'm just going to put it in the housing. Cue the internet outrage in 3, 2. Hey everyone, welcome back. Yeah, you heard that right. I'm going to put a used differential Pinion with its bearings into a housing, and I'm going to put it in red. Remember that housing I pulled out? It was July, I think it was. Go back to videos, you'll see it. I was going to pop it in because it's got a better highway gear ratio. It's like the original 291 gear. Found out that water had got inside of it and it was a bit seized up. Yeah, it was a bit seized up, all right. But what I did was I took it all apart, cleaned up the housing, and I'm going to pop in a set I have. Let me show you what I got. Well, first let me show you what came out. Yeah, this was nasty. All right, these are shot. I mean, the races are still just, they're stuck on the bearing. They're not going to pop off. The gears will spin, but it's rusted. It's bad. And the housing was really just as bad, but I've cleaned it up. Looks good now. What I did was clean it up, wire brush. I have a long antenna that has a 1/4-20 nut, stud on the end. I put a wire brush on there and then an old, polishing pad, and just kind of reamed it through back and forth with the wire brush, and then kerosene and this pad, and kind of cleaned it out. Ran a bunch of clean rags through it, and it's really all better, ready to go. So what am I putting in it? I'm putting these in it. This is a 323 gear set. Came out of a 7 1/4. It's got the bearings on it already on the pinion. It's got the bearings still on the carrier. And I know which race goes to what. I got the left side, I got the right side. And I've cleaned these up. And yes, they are not perfect by any means. I got to clean the gears up and the bearings. I got to put them in a little kerosene, clean them all off, hose them off a little brake clean, get them ready to go. And I bought a new bearing to go on here, on the outside. I need the races for this one and for that one. I got a seal coming, and we'll be able to put that all in. So why am I not bothering to put new bearings on this stuff? Firstly, I don't have the tools to do it. Okay? And I know what you're all thinking. You're screaming, then just bring it somewhere. I get that. You're right. If I was building a 8 3/4 rear end, I'd spend the money and the time, and I would do it right. The reality is, it's a 7 1/4. It's got a better gear set, so I can actually drive the car on the highway and enjoy it. And for as much as this car gets driven every year, the amount of miles on that, it's not going to make a difference. If things go very badly with this, I'll pop the other rear end back in. No harm, no foul. Also, when I got all the parts, I have another 8 3/4 SureGrip center section with 355 gears in it. I just need a housing and axles and backing plates and drums. But I've got the gear set and it's SureGrip. So the plan really is now to pull the 7 1/4 SureGrip out with the 391 gears, put it aside, inside, learn from my mistakes, take the used gear set of 323s and put it in the housing that originally came out of this car. And hopefully through the next couple of years, acquire the parts I need to put an 8 3/4 in this car. I've already got the chunk. That's the most expensive part. Now it's finding good housing, whether it be shortened or whatnot. But I've already cleaned this all up. I got to clean up the gear set and everything. We're going to walk you through setting it up on the fly. Now I'm going to say this up front. I've not ever done this kind of work before. Ever. I mean, I literally had to go and relearn how to use a micrometer to measure all the spacers that I have. all the differential carrier bearing spacers. I have a bunch of them, and I measured all of them so I know where they're going. The pinion spacer, I have this one. I have another one. It's on the pinion over here. So with a little luck, the parts I have, we're going to walk through setting this up, checking for the backlash, checking the gear pattern, the mesh. I'm going to go from there. That's the reality of this. It's a 7 1/4, better gear set, not going to get driven as much as a daily driver. If it was a daily driver, I'd be replacing those bearings. So please, do not flame me in the comments. I get it. This is what we got. We're going to go with it. So let's clean things up and we'll start assembly. The inner pinion bearing race is in, and you saw how many times I went back to it. And at first I did get it in there a little cockeyed. I had to tap it back the other direction, straighten it out, continue on, and obviously using a brass punch to get it going all the way. But that last little bit to go down there, I mean, I wanted to make sure it was seated all the way, and I used a feeler gauge to make sure I could not get this in between the race and the housing. And this is a 0.002 thousandths feeler gauge. And now, yeah, I don't usually like using a steel punch on races if I can help it, but I needed a little bit more oomph to get it seated. So this one's done. We'll flip it. I'll get the outer pinion race installed, and then we will put the pinion in and do a test fit. All right, we got that bearing race installed. I got a little bit of a gear oil. We're going to lube up the bearings a little bit before we slip them in. We're going to follow the factory service manual procedures for doing this, right? So I'm going to put the pinion bearing mounting shim. It's chamfered on one side. It must be installed on the pinion stem with the chamfered side toward the pinion head. So this is the shim that came with this pinion. It's a 0.099. If you look at it closely, there is a chamfered side. The other side is not. So that's the side that goes down. All right, so we're going to lube these up, a little bit of gear oil, slip them in, put the nut on, and we will, with the housing, with the nose up, we'll tighten the pinion nut to 240 foot-pounds, and then we will check the preload. All right, first things first, before we flip it up, we're going to have to put this in and hold it while we kind of get that thing moved around. So yeah, we're going to put a little bit of gear oil on there, spin this around some. So we want the bearing rollers to seat nicely into the race. Of course, that's going to fall out. So we got to hold all this together. Actually, let me slide this, let's come down a little bit first. Let me lube this bearing up a little bit first. Okay. What's going to help is if I get the nut and the washer to go on that yoke. Yeah, that'll help. There we go. The bearing doesn't really want to go on. So, I don't really want to whack with anything. And no, we did not put the seal on yet, because the service manual says not to. Because you want to check the preload first, because you might have to replace or swap out that shim that goes in there. Get this snugged up first. This nut's a little bit goobered up here. Hold on. We don't want any of that, now do we? That should still just kind of go on easily. Pull that off. Grab the nut off the other pinion. I know the pinion threads are good because the nut stopped halfway. Hold on. Okay. Oh, that's better. Let's get this snugged up. You want to spin it a few times because you want the bearing to seat. All right, so let me get a torque wrench and something to hold that with. Pipe wrench with power multiplier. All right, so they said 240 foot-pounds. All right. Okay, well, I only go to 150. That's a problem. 240 foot-pounds. I don't have a torque wrench that goes up that high. Well, I guess we're going to wing it. Okay, we're going to set this for 150. It's all I got. Okay, come on now. Okay, there's 150. Let's see. Correct preload is 15 to 25 inch-pounds in the upright position. 15 to 25. Oh, wait a minute. It's about 15. This particular inch-pound wrench goes in increments of 10. So 0, 10, 20, 30, 40. So between 10 and 20 would be 15. Yeah, we get 15. I'm guessing if I could get this tighter, confirmed tighter, that we get a little bit more out of it. So what I would like to try is a breaker bar and a pipe. Get a couple of ugga-duggas on this. If I can't get this a little bit tighter. Okay, give me just a little bit more. Felt it. Okay. Just a couple spins. Feels all right. So now let's give it another check. Okay, I like it. All right. What I'm going to do is I put this mark on the nut before I took it off of the other pinion, right? Because that's what you do. You mark the pinion, you mark the nut, so when you put it back together, you know kind of where you were. But since this is the nut, a different pinion, everything is from different components, I'm going to mark the pinion here so I know where to put this back to. There, that's all I need. Just mark. So now I'm going to take this apart. Now I'm going to take it apart. We'll put the seal back in. I'm going to clean these up a little bit first and make sure the seal surface on the yoke here is good. Then we'll put this back together. We're going to drop the diff in. Before we pull the yoke off so we can put the pinion seal in, we really need to drop the carrier in place and test, for side to side movement, and then check the backlash. Because if we need to pull the pinion back out, so we have changed that one spacer in there, we don't want the seal in there getting messed up. So we're going to do that, and I've already gone ahead and looked through the manual, and it says to start by putting a 0.254 inch preload spacer on the ring gear side, which would be this side right here, and then you'll measure feel the gauges till you get it pretty close. The largest one I have is 272. The smallest one I have is 258. So I actually went ahead and tried getting this set first. And I know with this one here, and the 260 and the 262 and the 264, I still had a lot of gap. It wasn't tight enough until I put the 269 here, and then I put the 272 here. So now with the pinion installed, we're going to drop the carrier in, put those in, and we'll see where we're at. Get that one there for a moment. And this is a balancing act because, as you noticed, I do not have a spreader. And it is tight. Okay, that's good. Now I didn't put any gear oil on the bearings ahead of time. I'm just going to put a little in here now. Just give it a little bit of spinning around. And everything seems to be moving nice and smooth. All right. So now let's torque on the caps. Got the caps kind of in place and snugged up, and it gets set to 40 foot-pounds. So let's do that real quick. All right, let's get the dial indicator set up and we can check for backlash. All right, we got the dial indicator set up, and this thing, this is old. This was in tools that I got from either my father or my grandfather, who was a machinist. This may have been used to literally check aircraft tolerances in jet engines at one point. So I get to use it. I'm kind of happy about that. So backlash, after everything's tightened up, should be between 0.004 and 0.007 of an inch. If it's not within this tolerance, it'll be necessary to refer to the chart and install differential spacers and recheck the backlash. So we know we have 269 on the left, 272 on the right. Let's check the backlash. Okay, I've zeroed the dial out. I'm holding the gear up against the pinion. I'm going to go to the full other extent. 7. We're right at the maximum allowable limit, looks like, because that's when it contacts the pinion. I'm going to say we got lucky on this, but with the pinion in and with the backlash checked at its maximum, the next step would be to put the marking compound on here. Yeah, with that all set now, even though the backlash is at the high end, I'm going to get some marking compound, put it on here, I'm going to spin it around and see what the pattern looks like. Man, how cool would it be if we got lucky and it's just good. And me knowing I'm not ever going to be that lucky, spun it around 180, checking the other side. Yeah, that's 10 thousandths. That's too much. Let me go here. Because the manual does say you're supposed to check it in 4 spots. Got to find the minimum backlash. Pushed against it a little bit. Okay, that's 11, 12. That's not good. This is back around where we were before, approximately. Huh. 15, 16. It's getting worse, isn't it? Yeah, 15. Yeah, I think giving it a few spins like that has kind of seated it. I knew that 7 was just too good to be true. Eight and a half, almost 9. Actually, hold on. Yes, 11, 12. All right, yeah, our backlash is out of spec. So, what's next? So, I really only have one option right now to try, and that's to take each one of these spacers, the 269 and the 272, swap them. Putting a thicker one on the left side, then pushing the gear over into the pinion a little bit more. That should take up a little bit of that backlash. So let's give that a try. Well, I've spun it around a few times, checked it in 4 different locations, and we've got like 15 thousandths, 14 thousandths, pretty much all the way around. So I'm not sure what to do now. Let me go back to the book and see what we can figure out. Well, the manual says that if you're at 0 end play, if your backlash is 15 thousandths, then I should add 20 thousandths to the left side spacer and then remove 10 from the right side. Well, I could probably remove 10 from the right side with one of the other spacers I have, but I can't add 20 because 272 is the biggest one I have. So not sure what I can do at this point with the spaces I have. Tis a problem. If I was building an 8 3/4, again, this is to get a temporary fix going, better highway gears. Man, I wish it was closer. But I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put some of the marking compound on here. We're going to check the tooth pattern, and we might just send it. Let's give that a shot, see what it looks like. I got some of this non-drying Prussian blue Permatex stuff. I know everybody's used to using the yellow stuff, but this is what I got from the that online stone auto place. You know the one with the magnets? Yeah. Looks like a little goes a long way here. Let's get that all nice in there. Let's spin this thing, see what happens. Okay, from what I can tell after rotating it through, it looks like it's hitting on the toe. It's kind of centered between the on the face, but it's hitting on the toe of the gear. Same thing if you look on the back side where it wiped the blue stuff onto the gear. It's hitting the toe more than it is toward the heel. So we come back here. You can see where it's wiping it on. And it's a little harder to see here, but you can see where it wiped it off toward the toe side. It's centered, but a little in there. So what that says, in some of the paperwork I've picked up, is that we have toe contact. So we have to move the ring gear away from the pinion. Okay. So how do we move the ring gear away from the pinion? I could swap those shims back. Might get a better gear pattern, right? That's not going to help us with our backlash problem. So for backlash, it's got a good contact, like in the middle. It's not high. I don't think it's low. I think it's pretty good, right? So there's only so many things you can move back and forth, up and down, right? And get the settings that you need to set. Now the pinion needs to go in first. Set the drag on the pinion, right? The preload, the bearing preload, and that is set correctly. Got good 15 to 20 inch-pounds of drag, so we know that that's good. We could change the preload by changing that shim, but that's not going to do much for moving the pinion up or down, the pinion height, right? For that, you need shims. For that, well, shims, which is great. I got a whole pile of them. I don't have a tool to really remove the bearing off of the pinion without destroying it to add a shim to get it to sit a little higher and maybe take up some of the backlash. Because we just saw that we can go side to side with a differential carrier. I've got the biggest spacers I have, and in the current configuration, which is where I had them the first time, we have a decent enough pattern. Now if I put a shim here between the bearing and the pinion, it's going to raise it up. It's going to move that pattern a little more toward the heel of the ring gear, away from the toe. And then we'd have to recheck side to side anyway. But that's not changing because of the bearings that are already on the carrier, the case, the housing, yada, yada, yada. So we're as good as we're going to get. I'm happier with a little more backlash and a better mesh. I think that's good. Like I said before, I've not done this kind of work before, so I am winging it big time. So I'm going to pop the yoke off, and we're going to put the seal on, get a little seal on there, and axle seals, axle seals. Then we'll swap it out and go for a ride, see what it sounds like. Hopefully it doesn't whine like a, well, hopefully it doesn't whine. Well, got the pinion seal in, that's all back on, torqued down, got the cover on, axle seals are in both ends, give this a quick wire brush, oh, cover on, yes I used the gasket, and I had a tag for the gear ratio, pop that little bugger on. So, it's really all set to go in, except I think we're going to give it a Craigslist rebuild. You know, because now we're jacked up and we are ready to swap this axle out. Now I got another set of brake lines to go with this, and we'll probably put those in once we get the axle back in. So without further ado, let's swap this out. Hey kids, this is just a reminder that when you got your entire rear end out, that one thing you should check is when you're swapping in a new yoke, you make sure that the bolt holes are clear of debris and such. Otherwise, you're having to clean them holes out under the car. Uncomfortable. But we're almost there. We're going to get that done, get the drive shaft installed, fluid in the axle, and then we'll be ready for a test drive. Alright, well, differential's full of gear oil, brakes are bled, everything's all ready to go. Wheels are on. I figure I'm going to fire it up, give it a few spins while it's still on the jack stands, and then we'll take it for a quick ride. What do you think? Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hear anything in the differential over the fuel pump, but we'll see on the test drive. Okay, we're spinning. It's reversed. Didn't seem to clunk. Reverse. Yikes. know, maybe too much backlash? All right, take the car for a test drive. Now, I've got a speedometer app set up on another spare phone I have, so I can check that against the car speedometer. Now, I know with the other gear ratio, we're like 20 or 30 over what we're running. So I'm hoping we're really a lot closer to that. Not that it's going to matter much. I just want to know where I'm at on the speedometer. I don't have a tachometer in here. But what I do have is obviously the computer fuel injection. So I got the laptop hooked up and the dashboard open, so I'll know where we're cruising at on the highway. So I'm not sure how accurate that is. I mean, we'll see. Feels like it's running a little high. So let's take it for a ride and see what happens. All right, well, this isn't working for some reason. So I'm not going to get any accurate RPM data today. But I'm going to take it for a ride up the highway now. Now, I just drove down to a commuter parking lot, and on the GPS speedometer, we're at like 47 miles an hour. Speedo was reading 55. So that's a lot better. So gear ratio had a lot to do with that. Axle feels smoother up to that speed, so we're going to get on the highway and cruise. See what happens. I can live with that. Cruising along, and engine does not feel like it's screaming. It feels comfortable. Doesn't feel like I'm, having to constantly push it. Coming off the highway, decelerating, I just let off the gas, and it was a nice, smooth deceleration. It didn't feel like the whole, car was just holding me back. Of course, it's loud. Things are still rattling, and that fuel pump is noisy, so I can't really hear any gears making noise. Oh, there you have it. Got the rear end done. I don't hear a lot of noise coming out of the rear end. It might be something. It's hard to tell. It's a very windy day today. A few air gaps in the windows, so I'm getting a lot of noise coming through, rattles, obviously. So I'm having a hard time telling, even over the fuel pump. But that said, what a joy to drive now. I mean, I liked the 391 gears. Don't get me wrong. Around town, stomping on it. Oh yeah, full tilt boogie, right? But on the highway, man, we were pulling over 3,000 RPMs on this V8 at 65 miles an hour. Not good. Now, even though I couldn't tell what the actual RPMs were today, I can tell that it's got to be well under 3,000. It's got like 2,500 in that area. Smooth ride, up to 70 miles an hour. Decel was great. It's a nice smooth deceleration, not like a lurch where you let off the gas with the higher gear ratio. So I'm calling this a win. We're going to drive this some more, put more miles on it, see what we can, if anything turns up with the axle. But I'm hoping it's good for a while we source the parts for the 8 3/4. So we can pop that in with the 355 gear set. But that's where I'm going to leave this one. It's a sunny day, and I'm going to go drive my car because I can. Thanks for watching, y'all. Appreciate you coming back. Smash that like button. If you like what we're doing here on the channel, consider subscribing, and I'll catch you next time.